Evolution had a very strong 2003. Initially, it seemed like the faction was going through problems with Orton and Batista being out injured, but it all worked out in the end, and by this time, Evolution was holding every single men's title on Raw. On the December 15, 2003 episode of Raw, Evolution came out with all the gold. The game was loud and proud and was mostly excited to mention that Goldberg failed. With him, you don't need to hype him like Goldberg, and to put it simply, Triple H said that they have all the gold and everyone's gonna learn to live under them. And they tried to demonstrate this by facing Shawn Michaels and Rob Van Dam in a handicap match later that night. For HBK, this was yet another strong performance. He put in the work and provided a tough challenge for Evolution. Van Dam was flying high on the outside, and at this point, despite the advantage Evolution had, it was anybody's match. He dropped the game with the sweet chin music and pinned the World Heavyweight Champion. It was going badly for the group, and it was all down to Randy Orton to change that. Eric Bischoff was relying on him to save the day because his job depended on it. You see, Mick Foley was a co-general manager with Eric Bischoff, and he wasn't happy about it. He motivated the IC champion to cast his own shadow, and this speech was enough for him to go out there and beat Mick Foley and send him packing as general manager. Foley booked the world title match between Michaels and Triple H for San Antonio right before he went out there. This was also for the Intercontinental Championship. This match was heated. Orton, despite that confidence, had a little nervousness. Turns out, he didn't need to worry because Foley walked away. He was ready to leave when Bischoff popped up. He ignored him, knowing very well that he's no longer a co-GM. Randy Orton, though, had other things to say, and he called him a coward and spat in his face, adding to his already hated heel character. And Foley did nothing about it. Okay, this was an iconic moment in Orton's career, but it took some convincing to do. You see, as much as Orton was a big heel in WWE at this point, he still had a lot of respect for the legends in the back. I had to talk Randy into spitting on me on camera, stated Foley. He did not want to do it, and then he finally said, please, Mick, what if I just pretend? I won't really spit on you. I said, Randy, this is one of the most important moments of your career. You need to dig down as deep into your lungs as you can, and people need to see that residue. Randy Orton felt that Foley was a smart coward, even though he backed off. It was for good reason, because he's a legend killer. It's better for him to not humiliate himself and go away. Since Foley walked away, Orton wanted to be named the winner of the match. Even wanted to be called the new hardcore legend. All of a sudden, Booker T came out. The 5-time champion told him to be worried about people that are around here. His New Year's resolution was to whoop Randy Orton's ass and win the Intercontinental Championship. Okay. Mark Henry ran in, assaulted Booker before Orton accepted the challenge. You see, a wounded and hurt Booker T is much easier to face than 100% Booker T. Alright, that sounded bad. I'm sorry. It's like saying 1 + 1 is 2, like duh. The Legend Killer seemed to underestimate Booker T, but Kane of all people ended up saving him. Orton capitalized on the distraction and dropped him with the RKO to retain the title. It was very quick, but the real match was the main event. Shawn Michaels in his hometown challenging for the World Heavyweight Championship against The Game. This match came from out of nowhere, and it wasn't really expected to be such a classic, but they gave them all the time and let them do their thing. Triple H didn't have the best reputation around this time period, and 2003 was actually one of his weakest years, if not his weakest. Very technical match early on. Both men were about wearing each other down with holds, and The Game managed to take control and isolate that once injured back to dominate. Flair was assisting on the outside and giving The Game an additional advantage. Match kicks up a notch. Michaels proves why he's the showstopper. Ref gets knocked down, and Triple H uses the belt, but it's still not enough for the win. Bischoff runs in, becomes the ref. Back and forth action. Triple H is bleeding, struggling with the HBK's fast-paced tempo, and even though it went against everything Bischoff stood for, he counted the fall for Michaels with the sweet chin music on The Game. The fans were going crazy, and for once, a match was gonna end with the hometown hero on top. Nope! This is WWE. Disappointment is what they love. Turns out, Shawn Michaels' shoulders were down on the mat, and it was a draw. The Raw GM even provoked Michaels, who ended up dropping Flair and gets back to dealing with Bischoff. He delivered a right hand on the Raw GM and he got fired. That was quickly reversed as Stone Cold was made the Sheriff of Raw. But yeah, this was a great match. Absolute classic. And again, nobody really expected Triple H to do it here, but that motivation HBK had was ridiculous. Great match. One of the best matches in Raw history. Probably the very best Raw match of the year. And it was on the final episode of the year. Now, this also meant that the feud wasn't over. Austin was the Sheriff and was going to do something about it. Triple H made fun of him being the Sheriff. He flipped him off, and the champion also made a joke out of the badge. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I don't care what you say. This was funny because he then asked him if he had the plastic belt in hat. I don't know, I was bursting out laughing because it was funny. Why am I gonna lie and say, oh, it wasn't funny? The Texas Rattlesnake said he'll uphold the law, and if it comes down to it, make Triple H's life a living hell. So basically, he thought Shawn Michaels had Triple H beat the previous week. He whooped his ass. Shawn Michaels came out and Stone Cold booked the last man standing match for the Royal Rumble. The champion was upset, so he dropped Michaels with a pedigree. Later that night, Flair and Batista dealt with the Dudley Boys. They attacked the duo earlier on to get a slight advantage, but that didn't work out so well, and Triple H had to save them. Michaels, though, was waiting after the match to get his get back. Randy Orton, meanwhile, was still looking looking for a match against Mick Foley. He challenged him to a match for that night, but as expected, it didn't happen. He was provoking him, calling himself the new hardcore legend, making a joke out of Foley, but it was eventually going to come to a head. Ahead of the Royal Rumble, Shawn Michaels and Triple H went face to face. The coach mentioned how both men were friends and wanted to know how they were actually together. This led to Triple H scooping in and mentioning that they were cool. HBK didn't want to talk about it, but the game did. He held animosity towards Michaels. Why? Because he was his sidekick. That wasn't the case though. He was the one pulling the wagon and helping him out where he needed it. He wasn't around and the fans realized he did all that work alone. 4 years away, Triple H had the most success in his entire career, so HBK admitted that it bothered him that Triple H did well, but it wasn't the reason he came back. Even then, when he came back, he proved he was better than Triple H. The champion agreed, but it was him who walked out of the ring at SummerSlam. He was the one that dropped him with a sledgehammer and walked unscathed. Triple H said that it's always been about one thing, and that's who's the best. It's not about their friendship and problems, it simply came down to that. There's only few that are better than Michaels. He's one of the very best, but he, Triple H, is better. The Royal Rumble, last man standing, that's what it comes down to, and it didn't matter in Triple H's eyes if he won it by 1 second. A win is a win. Best of all, he knows in his heart that Michaels knows in his heart that Triple H is better than him. Michaels demonstrated 1 second with a sweet chin music on the coach. Why? To show that something's gone like that. And what is this something that he's referring to? He's referring to the World Heavyweight Championship. Good promo. It went deeper beyond hatred for these two, but they pushed that aside and made the competition between them the main story for this match. Meanwhile, Mick Foley was expected to be at the show and a seat was saved for him to watch Randy Orton defend the Intercontinental Championship. Evolution were ready to help him out, but Austin threatened to run them over. With that said, Orton took a brutal beating from RVD just in time for a limo to arrive. After the commercial break, the IC champion was in control and these two put on a pretty good match. It's not their best match though. Ref bump, Orton with a low blow and a failed RKO, so he managed to hit a brutal DDT off the top rope to retain the title. He was constantly provoking Mick Foley, calling himself the new hardcore legend, and he still never showed up. As for Batista and Flair, they were set to defend the titles against the Dudleys at the Royal Rumble. It wasn't all good for Evolution. Orton almost won the right to enter the Rumble at number 30, but screwed up and got eliminated by Goldberg. Evolution tried to help, but failed. With that said, that tag team tables match at the Royal Rumble was very rushed. They opened the show but quickly ended things with Batista driving Devon through a table. Back to the game in HBK. While they did have personal animosity, this was simply down to competition. Triple H hated Shawn Michaels' guts and everything he stood for, manipulating the fans into believing he's the good guy in the story, having jealousy for his success, but it was all about the World Heavyweight Championship. This match is pretty good or boring depending on who you ask. With that said, watching this here, I understand why people have a problem with this last man standing match. For some reason, Shawn Michaels and Triple H were always desperate to put on a classic that when it actually comes down to it, the match suffers. They had a classic the previous month and they didn't need to think too hard with it. And when you have that and an underwhelming finish, you can see why people are disappointed. Triple H retained the title only because HBK was unable to get up. It's a solid match though, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was solid. It's just they're trying far too much to get a classic out of it when they didn't need to. Because at the end of the day, it's Triple H and Shawn Michaels. Triple H was out of his banter era in ring. He was much better here, but I don't know, they overthought this match. That's what it comes down to in my opinion. What about the Royal Rumble? Chris Benoit entered at number 1 and Randy Orton at number 2. These two stuck together throughout the match until number 21 came out, and it wasn't Test. It was the same man that was expected to show up but was called a coward for backing out. Mick Foley. Orton was looking like he saw a ghost and Foley delivered a flurry of punches. He sent the Legend Killer and himself over the top rope, and this didn't matter to Foley because all that mattered was taking out Orton. He managed to fight back and make a run for it though. So there's that. The Mick Foley Randy Orton was asking for was here. He was ready to fight. He was ready to retaliate after the weeks of provoking from Randy Orton. Evolution would continue to have more and more obstacles in their road to WrestleMania. The next night on Raw, Triple H came out to talk about the Royal Rumble. Now you guys know this guy will sell a beating like Dolph Ziggler sells finishers. He said that 2 men bled last night for this title, but in the end, he stood tall. Shawn Michaels interrupted and the game was irritated with dealing with him and he had enough. Even then, HBK said that they haven't gotten started, and there's the Sheriff. Stone Cold Steve Austin. He had plenty of praise for both men, especially HBK saying he deserves a rematch, but that wasn't going to happen. He mentioned that the winner of the Royal Rumble gets to choose who he faces. There's a loophole, and so he brought him out. Chris Benoit. Both men were angry, and with regards to Benoit, he was on SmackDown. The storyline was Paul Heyman was making things tough for him, leading to Benoit jumping over to Raw. This was the first time somebody jumped ship after winning the Royal Rumble. He said that he fought for 18 years to be the best, and at WrestleMania, he will fulfill his destiny and become the next World Heavyweight Champion. With that said, Chris Benoit was one of the most respected wrestlers in the industry back then, and even though he didn't have that charisma or mic skills, he easily stood out because very few had the in-ring skill he did. He had this intensity about him, and 2003 was an important year for him because the fans started seeing the image. They wanted him to be the champion. Did he have as much fan support as somebody like Eddie Guerrero? Doubtful. but he had this passion and intensity about him that allowed for the fans to see, hey, this guy deserves the championship. And when I mean deserve, a bunch of wrestlers on the roster deserve the title, but this guy, it felt like he needed to be the world champion. Later that night, Mick Foley came out to explain things and talk about why he walked out. He said that he couldn't bring himself to do what he had to do to get the job done. And while he did cost Orton the Royal Rumble, he still wanted him to come to the ring. Why? So Orton could spit in his face, and this disturbed him. He didn't want to do it again because he knew what Foley was capable of. This guy was going through Hell in a Cell matches, I Quit matches, Last Man Standing matches, and through all of that, he was always intense. So why would he spit on a man who's more unpredictable than a Florida citizen? The hardcore legend was doing all he could to provoke Orton and make him do it. He was literally instructing him to do it, and when he did, Orton knew what was to come. Foley said that the idea of Orton as a hardcore legend is horrible. He refused to be spat on and disrespected after all he did for his legacy. There's no worry of entering the darkness because for him, he's already there. If anything, he'll welcome it. He snapped and Orton was in danger. Evolution had to run in there and make the save, and Foley rebounded and sent them running. Great promo. You could feel how much it frustrated him that he didn't do anything a month earlier. He himself disrespected his own legacy and spat at everything he represented despite spending 16 years in the business. This blood, sweat, and tears, and he just allowed for some random guy to spit on him. He was a coward. And man, Mick Foley is one of the greatest on the mic, but I haven't heard many say it these days. If you go back a couple of years ago, his legacy is at the top with the best talkers was cemented, and me, myself, I almost forgot how good he is because I don't go back to a bunch of storylines that involve him a lot because I probably did him a long time ago. But I'm going to just say it right now, there's not many like Mick Foley out there. The following week on Raw, Chris Jericho hosted the highlight reel with his guest being Chris Benoit. Benoit was well aware of who he was dealing with. Y2J casted doubts in Benoit's mind, telling him maybe he can't win the big one. He showed similarities with him, mentioning how he became the undisputed champion. Hell, even Ric Flair doubted him at the Royal Rumble. The Nature Boy came out to talk about this, and he called him the most technically gifted wrestler of all time, but he's a runner-up. Now, instead of praising him, he went about glazing Triple H. Benoit said that he has the privilege of fighting the man at WrestleMania, but it would be great to fight the Nature Boy now. That didn't happen. Instead, he faced Mark Henry. The game watched on from a distance, and he was impressed with what he saw. Shawn Michaels, meanwhile, was still upset over Chris Benoit joining Raw. So Stone Cold told him to do something about it. Mick Foley was confronted by Test, meanwhile, leading to Orton capitalizing on this and dropping him with the Intercontinental Championship. So that feud was continuing to develop, and it would lead to a whole other thing about a month later. The game said that Benoit has to know what it means to face him and told him that there's no turning back after signing the contract. That's what it was. Basically, he's like, oh, why don't you go back to SmackDown? Maybe you'll actually win the title there. You actually have a chance. With me, I'm the game. I just cut it short. That's basically what Triple H said. High drama at the end of the night with Foley and Orton brawling, Benoit and Triple H going face to face. Even HBK and Benoit had a moment. Great stuff. The Royal Rumble winner was starting to silence the critics. He made Ric Flair tap out, but this didn't stop Triple H from letting him know that the brightest lights are far too much for him. The World Champion gave an image of Benoit potentially winning the title and even got the fans to chant his name before telling him that it's a dream. Reality says he will choke. WrestleMania, 18 years of blood, sweat, and tears all for nothing. Right as Benoit was about to sign, Shawn Michaels came out. He told Benoit that he should have taken care of his problems on SmackDown because his problems with Triple H are much bigger than anything. He's close to finishing it, but he wanted to finish it at WrestleMania. Benoit still wanted to sign the contract, so Michaels super kicked him all while Triple H was enjoying what he was seeing. But then Michaels signed the contract himself. Okay, like Benoit's name isn't on it, right? Mick Foley meanwhile made a challenge for Orton at WrestleMania. The Legend Killer said that if he wants the match, he has to prove he wants a fight, so he did. But this turned out to be an attack by Evolution. A beaten and battered Foley still managed to come out at the end of the night, but only made things worse for himself. He took an RKO on the concrete floor. Triple H was upset with the whole contract situation, feeling that HBK didn't deserve a title shot, and he was worried about defending the title twice. So he called out Eric Bischoff. The Raw GM gave him the option to defend the title then and there, but he didn't give a damn about what the fans thought. Chris Benoit came out, and just as things were getting tense, Triple H wanted to steer him in HBK's direction. That didn't work, and Evolution had to run in and make the save. It went from bad to worse, with Evolution losing the tag team titles to RVD and Booker T after Mick Foley interfered and caused enough drama, leading to RVD and Booker capitalizing to win the titles. This heated rivalry between Foley and Orton was far too intense, with Eric Bischoff allowing them a confrontation. But it's non-sanctioned. Once again, Orton turned down the WrestleMania challenge, feeling it wouldn't be fair. Foley's broken down while he's not even in his prime yet. This was a one-sided brawl, but it didn't take too long for Batista and Flair to come out. Orton took advantage with a low blow and they went to work. These beatings were getting more and more brutal, with Orton practically fighting a dummy. It got worse with a punt, a Batista bomb, and to the trio, it felt like Foley was never going to be seen again. Later that night, Benoit and Michaels had a competitive match. Triple H though came out, and this slight distraction led to Shawn Michaels scoring the victory. He dropped him as well, and then Stone Cold came out. His appearance had to do with with WrestleMania 20. It was revealed that Triple H was going to defend the title in a triple threat match against Chris Benoit and Shawn Michaels. This was the first triple threat match to main event WrestleMania, and that game still wasn't happy a week later. Not to the point he was previously, but then he realized, hey, I'm always overcoming the odds. It was natural to him. He called WrestleMania the biggest night of his career and promised to beat the Icon and the Rabid Wolverine. It was a good promo. The problem was, Triple H used to have so many long promos at the time that it gets overlooked, but this one was actually good. Then Chris Benoit came out. He showed a lot of respect to the game, but also said that the champion hasn't proven much since he came to Raw. Evolution provoked him to enter the ring and prove himself, but he was prepared. Even then, Shawn Michaels made the save and walked straight into the crossface. That super kick had some ramifications. This was chaotic. The Sheriff came out, calmed things down, and a couple of minutes later, Chris Benoit made Batista tap out once again, overcoming an obstacle on the road to WrestleMania. They're going all out with him. Batista, despite being a mid-carder, never tapped out before until now. Far too much drama for Evolution heading into the big show. Orton and Batista were saved by Benoit and HBK's own drama in a tag team match, which opened way for Evolution to capitalize and take out their rivals. The night was looking good for the faction. Mick Foley, who was embarrassed and demoralized, made his return, and Triple H couldn't believe Foley was this stupid to come back. The trio were ready to take him out at the end of the night, but not before giving him some words. It was clear they were heading towards a fight, and for Evolution, it was going to be business as usual. But they were bored. They had enough of beating him up, so Orton gave Foley the option to leave and walk away. He had enough as well, and after Orton made the challenge, he decided to challenge all three of them, and he had a partner. Foley's reputation was ruined. It was shot in the back, so he had to give somebody else a call. Orton made a mockery out of Mr. Hollywood and accepted the challenge. But then Foley revealed he shouldn't call him. They should tell him face to face. He said that Mick Foley was coming back to Raw, but he didn't say he was coming to Raw alone. And there was The Rock. He was back for the first time in 3 months, and for the first time during this feud, Mick Foley finally got one over Evolution, emphatically, with the great one hitting the people's elbow, the Rock bottom. It was a great moment. The Rock was slowly disappearing, and moments like this weren't happening often in this era. The Rock told Evolution that their days of beating up Mick Foley are over. The Rock and Sock connection were back, and it was hype. It's nice to see Foley and Rock rehash their problems. There was some points where their relationship was a bit off. Not in the sense of, I hate you, I don't like you, but there was some resentment from Foley. One of the best short-time tag teams in wrestling history for sure. Probably the most entertaining. On the final Raw before WrestleMania 20, the three men in the triple threat match gave their final thoughts. For Chris Benoit, it was fulfilling an 18-year destiny. Michaels, it was all about the title, but more so about ending this feud with Triple H. Benoit found some common ground with Michaels, saying they're both passionate about Triple H losing their title. The game, though, told the fans to get used to disappointment and let the two men know that he makes the most out of a small opportunity. What was his advantage? Their egos. Shawn's ego will make it impossible for Chris Benoit to win the title. Same with Chris Benoit. Triple H said that they can all agree that Benoit Michaels' ego is all the edge he needs to win the match. Later that night, The Rock hosted This Is Your Life from Mick Foley. It was more on the south side when compared to the original. The original was just The Rock being a world-class hater and thinking Foley was stupid. It all flipped on Rock's head when a critic told him his movie sucks. It was all fun and games for the duo, but then they came out. Batista dropped The Rock, and once again, the numbers got to Mick Foley. Evolution was far too much in this situation and gave a preview of what's to come at WrestleMania. Great build for both matches. This one, Mick Foley was a legend at Crossroads. Bring out that dark side that takes him to dangerous depths and give Randy Orton a lesson, or back off and allow for the young upstart to cause chaos as he sees fit. Ultimately, Foley can't run away from what brought him to the dance. It was second nature to him at this point, and it was also necessary to shut up Randy Orton for the good of the fans and for the good of WWE. Destiny is what drives Chris Benoit. 18 years in this business. Surely all this hard work leads to something. But wait, the Heartbreak Kid's story is meant to end for good here, right? Returning to the main stage in the main event against his old friend. Both had strong builds. Evolution had a great promo right next to the stairs. Orton kicked Foley, and Rock and Sock electrified before the match, and about this one, it was strong. This match feels a little unbelievable all these years later, because when you hear Mick Foley face Randy Orton at WrestleMania, it's like, yeah, he did, we know that. But then you hear The Rock did face Randy Orton at WrestleMania, and it still feels strange. This match was one of the best handicap matches ever. I really enjoyed it, and especially looking at it differently. This was The Rock's last WrestleMania for 7 years. He finally faced Orton and Batista. Despite being away for a while, he looked really good out there. I think it's unfortunate that Rock wasn't around, not because of his presence, but the fact that we missed out on his in-ring run. He really improved in 2002, but we didn't see much of it. He left right around his prime in-ring. Now, usually the babyfaces win at WrestleMania, but the whole point of Mick Foley coming back was to help Randy Orton and give him that edge. His reputation in the back at the time wasn't the best. He was a part of Evolution, immature, and some felt that he wasn't ready and that he didn't deserve his spot. That would change though. Orton caught Foley off guard with an RKO to score his first victory at WrestleMania, and Evolution did well with the first match. Very enjoyable stuff. You could see where WWE was going with Batista and Randy Orton. They were building him up well. Flair was like the gatekeeper. He was helping them on the side, this experience. It was some nice stuff, and it was a sign towards the future. Randy Orton was doing well. He's going to get an even bigger push as the months went by. What about the main event? Yeah, I believe this was considered the greatest main event in WrestleMania history at the time. Great promo, mostly highlighting Benoit's destiny. Now, initially, this match was considered to be a ladder match, since WrestleMania 10 had the success of Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels 10 years earlier in that same arena. It made sense, but it's too complicated with Benoit's story and the fact that the WrestleMania main event doesn't need some big-ass match to it. All they had to do was wrestle. 2003 was a rough year for Triple H, but it was back on track in ring. You could say whatever about the results, but 04 in ring is a very underrated year for Triple H. I was watching half of the matches here for the videos. He was much better, much faster, much more in tune than previously. It has the reputation of 03 almost unfairly, and the reason why I say almost is because it blends in with the whole Reign of Terror thing, so that's why. But if you actually watch the matches from 04, he was much better. The white boots were iconic. Everyone put in the work to make this a classic, especially Shawn Michaels, who served as the middle guy to elevate a match that already had the potential to be great. I think it's cool they added him here. Blood was happening often during this era, but Michaels having it all over his face made for a nice visual. Benoit as a threat forced Michaels and Triple H to coexist for a moment and go back to having a singles match. He did eventually return, but at this point Michaels took the role of a villain trying to ruin his dream. The fans were fully behind Benoit and were actually booing Shawn Michaels. They made you doubt Benoit, but he was determined to win the title. And the moment in the crossface was legendary. He forced the game to tap out. Looking at it from that time period's perspective, I don't think there was a more satisfying ending, a more rewarding ending during that era of WWE. To see one of the most loved and respected wrestlers of his generation finally earn the right to call themselves champion and celebrate with his very best friend who had championship gold as well. This was impossible to imagine only 2 years earlier. Now, despite Benoit winning the title, Triple H opened the show the next night with his arm in a sling, and if you watch Raw from this era, it feels weird to see him without the title. He indicated that Benoit's win was a fluke because one match doesn't make somebody the best. Triple H admitted that he tapped out and asked the fans if they were happy before adding that it was 2-on-1. Even though he lost, he was still the best at what he does. Chris Benoit interrupted and gloated about being champion in front of the former champion, and he said that he showed consistency week after week, month after month, year after year, and challenged Triple H to a rematch. He said that even on Benoit's best day, he won't make him tap. The new champion dropped Triple H and sent him running. Evolution came out leading to Shawn Michaels making the save, so Eric Bischoff booked a handicap match for the main event. While Triple H's worries were about winning back the title, he was also worried about Evolution being separated in the draft. With regards to the main event, it went bad for Evolution. HBK and Benoit had their issues, but it all worked out here. Triple H was going to get his title shot if all things stood, meaning if he didn't get drafted to SmackDown, he was going to get the title shot. John Cena, though, had other plans. Paul Heyman's SmackDown pick was chosen by him, much to the dismay of the GM. Bischoff was insistent, and when Heyman revealed who it was, his jaw dropped. The game was about to collapse in the back when he heard that Triple H himself was drafted to SmackDown. Like he heard he was jobbing to the Hurricane clean in the middle of the ring. The wrestlers in the back were proud to see him leave, and since SmackDown had such a huge pick, the game got a title shot against Latino Heat later that night. Batista and Flair meanwhile reclaimed the World Tag Team Championships. They had little time with Triple H as a SmackDown wrestler, but I love the fact that just for a single night he got to face Prime Eddie Guerrero, and the match was actually good. It's not no pay-per-view match, but for a Raw main event, it holds its own. Evolution tried to provide help for Triple H, but it ended up leading to an all-out brawl that rivals just about any from this era. SmackDown vs. Raw with the very best. Even Stone Cold came out with an ATV. Great stuff. This was amazing. By this time the following week, Triple H was back on Raw after Eric Bischoff traded Booker T and the Dudleys to SmackDown. Now, 2004, Eric Bischoff would trade his balls to keep Triple H on Raw. This guy would have done anything for Triple H at this point. Barrett calling out every enemy. Orton in particular once again provoked Mick Foley and called him a coward. This was enough for him to come out. The hardcore legend admitted that Orton proved himself at WrestleMania. He's capable of beating a Hollywood actor and a man that writes children's books in a handicap match. If it was a one-on-one, he would have kicked his ass all over Madison Square Garden. Flair complained about Foley not responding to a challenge for a match at Backlash. He said he wanted a match with no Evolution at ringside. This is no problem. What about the Intercontinental Championship? Okay, and Foley thought it was too good to be true. The one-on-one match he was looking for, it was enticing, but there was more. Mick Foley said that if Orton wants him so bad, then they'll do it on his terms. False count anywhere. Ric Flair said they had no problem on Mick Foley's terms, but he wanted to hear Orton accept the challenge. Was he going to be a wimp or finally take up the offer and challenge at Backlash? Orton accepted, and Mick Foley said he better show up 3 times tougher than he is, otherwise he'll tear him apart. The Game returned later that night attacking the Hurricane, and I almost forgot, this was a memorable episode. He said that this was a message to everybody in the locker room out here laughing at him for getting traded to SmackDown. Eric Bischoff would have traded any of them because Triple H is the #1 guy. He's the marquee. The seats are going to be filled. The Game thought Eric Bischoff would do what's best for business, and that's changed the match at Backlash to include him. Bischoff came out and said it himself. He would have traded in the entire roster for the Game. With regards to the title match at Backlash, it couldn't be changed. He promised HBK a title shot, but he was going to do a rematch of WrestleMania 20. Chris Benoit versus Shawn Michaels versus Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship at Backlash. With Evolution back at the forefront, the group decided to throw their weight around and go after Shelton Benjamin for laughing at Triple H the previous week. The joke was on Evolution because it seemed like Benoit and Michaels beat Flair and Batista for the tag team titles. Turns out, Ric Flair wasn't the legal man, so the match continued. Johnny Nitro was officiating the match like he had a parlay involving Evolution, and after being assaulted by Michaels, he disqualified them. Meanwhile, Shelton Benjamin wanted a match with Triple H. He was out to defend his honor, and Stone Cold was proud to see him go after the Game. Chris Benoit knew what Shelton was getting himself into and wanted to be by his side. Even Mick Foley gave him some words. This thing felt like a SVR story mode intro or something, like they were trying to talk to him. He's a rookie, young guy, you could do this, It felt like I was playing a PS2 SVR game while watching this. Triple H underestimated Shelton Benjamin a little too much. Benjamin was giving the Game his very best shots, and it was a nice introduction to Shelton on Raw. Especially because this was his first time as a singles wrestler. It was a great match with Benjamin playing the ultimate underdog. He was putting up a fight with the entire crowd by his side, and a distraction on the outside led to Benjamin capitalizing on Triple H with a stinger splash and a roll-up to beat the Game. Incredible moment for Benjamin. It instantly made him a guy to watch out for because for the last year, Triple H dominated Raw. He wouldn't lose to a main eventer, let alone a mid-carder. And this is exactly what he complained about the following week. But in the moment here, Shelton Benjamin was a made guy. Was he a superstar? No, but he was on his road to becoming a big star for WWE after beating Triple H. It showed how much they thought of him, how highly they thought of him to actually go out there and beat the Game. The guy who just made events at WrestleMania, who held the World Championship twice in the span of a year. It was nice stuff. Triple H did complain about losing to Shelton Benjamin, but the main topic was about the triple threat match. He thought the odds of Benoit winning twice is impossible. It was a miracle he won the first one. How's he going to win a second with Shawn Michaels and Triple H? Shelton Benjamin came out and the Game told him that he can make a career out of what he did last week, and Shelton Benjamin added fuel to the fire. So Triple H gave him a rematch. Meanwhile, Mick Foley had some words for Randy Orton. He brought out a present. Foley gave a daunting preview of Backlash and said that he's going to bring the kind of blood that involves using special effects in movies. The Intercontinental Champion was stressed and worried because this was a crazy kind of Mick Foley he was dealing with. It wasn't the previous one who just wanted to shut him up. This was a guy that wanted to hurt him. Now, even though Triple H promised to not make the same mistake twice, he messed up again, losing by countout and wanted to retaliate immediately. Evolution jumped him and left the upstart bloody and beaten. Foley, Shawn Michaels, and Chris Benoit ran in to make the save, and Eric Bischoff was upset by this. So he booked a 4-on-4 tag team match for the following week. Evolution ambushed them from behind, and this advantage helped the faction stand tall to end the show on top. Now, the final Raw before Backlash was intense. Mick Foley didn't really want to take out Randy Orton and praised him for a lot of things. Cactus Jack, though, wants to do it. Orton tried to ambush Foley, but ended up realizing he was dealing with one of the craziest men in wrestling. With that said, this was the only time Evolution ever teamed up on TV. It sounds a bit strange, but it's actually true. This was the only time I think Evolution ever teamed up in a tag team match in general. Raw back then was experiencing a resurgence. In ring, it was better than SmackDown after WrestleMania 20. They were having longer matches. Everything was crazy back then. Like, there was actually some hype regarding the product on Monday nights. And there's a lot of mentions here that I didn't mention, but a lot of them involved Evolution in 20-plus minute matches. And for the most part, they were good. And this main event only served to cement the fact of Raw being better than SmackDown in ring at the time. The crowd in Chicago was so into it, and for good reason. This was awesome. Raw hadn't seen an exciting multi-man match like this in years. It almost reminds me of the Attitude Era. Every story coming together with some intense action that never gets dull. Shawn Michaels scored the victory for his team, and it didn't look good for Triple H ahead of Backlash. Strong build for Orton and Foley. There's only one way to go after WrestleMania. False count anywhere. With that said, Shelton Benjamin opened up the show with Ric Flair in a decent match. Flair's experience and Benjamin's athleticism made for a good one. Shelton Benjamin won as expected. But Orton wasn't impressed. He claimed he wasn't scared of Mick Foley and said that he's going to show a different side. One of the most impressive star-making performances for a wrestler. Mick Foley was pushed to a point where he was deranged, so deranged that he had to bring out Cactus Jack, all because of Randy Orton, a young upstart who had to pay his dues. Now, if you're like me, this was a must-watch as a kid on YouTube. They used to have a bunch of matches in 5 parts, and I specifically remember watching this one. I'm sure a bunch of you back in 2008, 2009 used to watch these matches on the most clutch website known to man, Dailymotion. A bunch of matches were on YouTube, but Dailymotion had even more. Foley physically disfigured Orton's face and taught him a lesson in hardcore wrestling. The Legend Killer was humbled and was forced to adapt to this entirely different situation. Foley was doing whatever he wanted and almost lit up a barbed wire baseball bat, but Eric Bischoff threatened to give Randy Orton the win. Orton took spots and went above and beyond to make this work. He was seen as a pretty boy, and for Foley, it was business as usual. The best spot was the RKO onto the thumbtacks. Foley reversed it, dropped Orton onto the thumbtacks, and it was insanity, and that moment, it changed everything for Randy Orton. And through all of this, you forget it's for the Intercontinental Championship. Foley was looking to rip his skin. The last thought on his mind was a title. Then Foley threw him out the stage. The refs tried to push him away, but he dropped them and jumped onto Orton. He was throwing everything at the champion, but he still kicked out and was fighting back. Orton had to hit an RKO on the barbed wire to retain that title. An incredible performance. Randy Orton in a tough situation was guided to superstardom by Mick Foley. It served its job in establishing Randy Orton as a star. He went from a young upstart to a surefire main eventer, and this performance only cemented his main event status. It was a situation where WWE started imagining Orton as the next World Heavyweight Champion. Mick Foley went above and beyond. This man randomly came out of retirement, hurt himself all to help some random young guy. That said, Orton himself has a lot of respect for Foley. He said, "I thought it was really special for Mick Foley to come out of retirement just to work with me," Orton proclaimed before thanking a few more of his mentors. "I'm so grateful for so many superstars that took the time to help mold me into what I eventually became in this business, and Mick Foley is at the top of that list, along with Triple H and Ric Flair for helping me get there. Without them, I wouldn't be here." Great stuff. One of the best matches, it was the coming out party of Randy Orton. This was where everyone started to see him differently and was like, hey, this guy's actually good. He's not overhyped. He's not overpushed. He's good. With that said, the triple threat match was yet again another memorable match. Chris Benoit was back in Edmonton in front of his family. HBK was hated. They were still pissed at Montreal, and they even teased it at one point with the sharpshooter and Earl Hebner. Other than that, this was amazing. I prefer WrestleMania 20, but this match really holds its own, and to some, it's better than WrestleMania. It was that damn good. Benoit did it again, but this time he made HBK the most hated heel of the night tap out. They really went all out to establish him. He made both Triple H and HBK tap out. Great stuff. One of the best matches of the year. It's kind of weird watching it, though, compared to WrestleMania 20 for obvious reasons, but it was actually good. It was really good. Triple H was in a foul mood the next night, but it was the opposite for Orton. He felt all grown up and thanked Mick Foley that he didn't face a children's book author, he faced Cactus Jack, and he came out of it a living legend. Edge interrupted and came in all pissed, saying Orton should spit in his face and disrespect him. Batista and Flair ran in before Benoit came in to even the odds. Triple H followed up with a lot of anger and dropped him with a pedigree. Eric Bischoff booked a tag team titles match between Flair and Batista and Benoit and Edge. They were battered and beaten, so the Edge was with Evolution, but they ended up losing the titles. It went from bad to worse with Triple H having no title shot. HBK got one over him, and Tajiri spat green mist in his face. Was this month Triple H's community service for the Reign of Terror? I don't know. But that said, he ended up destroying Tajiri later that night, so I guess that proves our theory to be false. Randy Orton was still busy disrespecting legends. He provoked Harley Race and spat in his face. Another legend disrespected. Shelton Benjamin ran in, overpowered the Intercontinental Champion with a ridiculous clothesline, and made his intentions known. He wanted the title. Edge got one over him as well the following week. So Evolution was in a tough situation at this point. You know, stuff's going down, but it wasn't going well for them. And Edge winning that match, this gave him a title shot. Meanwhile, Shawn Michaels and Chris Benoit had one of the best matches of the year, a very competitive bout that felt too good to see on Raw. This was pay-per-view level stuff. But then Triple H came out and cost Michaels the title. This meant Benoit was moving towards another feud, and Triple H and Shawn Michaels were going to wrap up theirs. HBK returned the favor the following week, and slowly but surely, the feud was becoming far too intense for a normal match. HBK said that he wanted to finish it then and there, but Bischoff ruined everything. He suspended him. But before he could leave, Shawn got some of Triple H. In other places, Edge and Orton had an exciting match. It wasn't on the level of their future matches, but it was solid stuff. The Legend Killer got one over Edge, who was seething. He would be put to the side and would come in later on, but for the moment, Orton had to focus on another challenge. Orton was proud of himself but wanted to make the night about Evolution. Triple H was going to win the Battle Royal, and they were going to ensure it. All of a sudden, Shelton Benjamin interrupted. He couldn't believe Orton was doing all this talk and sucking up about Triple H, a man Shelton beat twice. Tonight wasn't about Evolution, it was all about Shelton Benjamin winning the Battle Royal, to which Orton said luck runs out and straight up said he's better than Shelton. So he wanted a title shot. Orton's like, You're uppity. That's the problem with you people. Give you an inch, take a mile. Whoa. And so Shelton insulted him. He overpowered the champion, and even though this frustrated Orton, he couldn't let it bother him because he was busy. He had the chance to win the tag team titles with Batista. That didn't work well, but the main goal was Triple H winning the Battle Royal. That's what mattered most. He knew that they would come in clutch and get the title shot. Evolution had done well with the numbers advantage, but ended up going another direction as time went on. Shelton Benjamin in particular frustrated Orton and Triple H and even eliminated the Intercontinental Champion. He got thrown out of the game, and at this point it looked like Triple H was going to win this thing when all of a sudden Shawn Michaels ran in and cost him the match. He returned the favor and even made a mockery out of the game. Since these issues were personal and far too intense, Eric Bischoff booked the match for Bad Blood. Triple H versus Shawn Michaels. The following week, the game was waiting for Michaels outside the arena and ended up attacking Stevie Richards. A while later, Michaels popped up and a bunch of referees had to separate them. It was intense. It was some very entertaining stuff. Like, back then, I'm not trying to be an old head back in my day, whatever, but back then, these feuds had this, intensity about them that's very hard to replicate nowadays. I think the usage of blood and all this violence helped a lot. It really helps. In the arena, Chris Jericho hosted the highlight reel with his guest, the Intercontinental Champion, Randy Orton. Y2J asked if he changed his mind about giving Shelton Benjamin a title shot, and it was the same answer. So Jericho asked, "Why are you so scared of Shelton Benjamin?" It was getting intense with Orton showing disrespect on Jericho's own show, and he said that if Shelton Benjamin is unworthy, how did he beat Triple H? The Legend Killer had no problem adding Chris Jericho to the list of legends he killed, and Orton slapped him. So Jericho hit an enziguri. Batista makes the save, leading to Shelton Benjamin running in, and Eric Bischoff booked the tag team match. This time around, Shelton Benjamin pinned the Intercontinental Champion. So they were pushing Shelton Benjamin hard. Once again, I'm saying it. They're pushing him hard. They're trying to make you think to yourself, hey, this guy's a future champion. He was that damn good. Very talented wrestler. Easily stood out on Raw because his offense was unique. He had an energy and intensity about him that very few on the roster matched, especially in the mid-card scene. In the back, HBK got attacked by Triple H in Eric Bischoff's office. This thing was bad. It was rough, and at the end of the night, it was yet another confrontation. Triple H grabbed the mic and called out Shawn Michaels. He came out as expected, and this brawl frustrated Bischoff to the point where he booked the Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood. And that's exactly what Michaels wanted. This is a great brawl. This sold the feud well to the point where anything other than a Hell in a Cell match wasn't going to work. And that's something a lot of feuds can't have. That level of intensity where Hell in a Cell is the end of a feud. With that said, Randy Orton was still being bothered by Shelton Benjamin, and it got to the point where he faced him in a non-title match with Shelton getting a shot if he wins. Batista was making things tough for him and even exposed the turnbuckle. This didn't work though, and Batista's interference basically cost Orton the match. Orton's dirty tactics weren't enough to score the win, and Shelton finally got his title shot. Meanwhile, Shawn Michaels was banned from the building and Triple H was annoyed. He said that the feud is going to end at Bad Blood and told Michaels he'll see him in hell. The following week, he said that he may not be a religious man, but Shawn Michaels is. He's got to change that because he's walking into his world. Hell in a Cell. He can't just be going into it like a normal match. Triple H said that even Jesus Christ had a moment of doubt and pain. He may not go to heaven, but this Sunday, Triple H, is going straight to hell. Randy Orton and other places got one over his opponent at Bad Blood and dropped him with the Intercontinental Championship. Randy Orton was a tough challenge for Shawn Michaels in the main event. Evolution watched on from the top of the arena. While Orton did put in the work, it wasn't enough. Batista had to interfere to cause a DQ, and Triple H couldn't believe what he was seeing. A bloody Shawn Michaels overcoming the challenge in front of him. Batista got dropped. Flair, and Michaels was on his way to the top. They had an all-out brawl to end the show. Strong build. This was a very, very, very strong build, and the reason why is they had their issues. They hated each other in the past, but it was never to the point where they attacked each other outside randomly. That's why they had to do a Hell in a Cell match and storyline. I loved it. Great build. With that said, Shelton Benjamin and Randy Orton at Bad Blood was good. The match was scheduled for later, but it happened from out of nowhere. The match itself was good and highlighted the improvements both men made in the last year, especially Shelton Benjamin. Ultimately, Orton had to cheat to win because the challenger always bounced back. Shelton looked good in defeat, and it was clear that they were going to push him harder. As for Hell in a Cell, it's a great match on paper. However, these guys wanted to go for 47 minutes. If they cut it a bit, this Hell in a Cell match would be loved more. But they tried too hard to make it something that sold how much they hated each other, and in doing so, some people see this match as a disappointing one. It was actually good. The selling was tremendous, but there was a lot of moments where they hit moves and wait 5 minutes before fighting back. Triple H scored the victory after a pedigree, and he ended the feud as the winner. The next night on Raw, JR interviewed both men. He said that it's time to end this and shake hands. HBK extended his hand, and Eric Bischoff interrupted. Kane came in as well and booted HBK, and Triple H wanted no part of this and left. At this point, the game was focused on the world title again, and Bischoff was going to give him a title shot if he beat the hell out of Eugene. Later that night, Chris Jericho hosted the highlight reel, and his guest was Eugene. Chris Jericho told him that Triple H doesn't like him, and the reason why his uncle made the match is because he wants him to leave. All of a sudden, Evolution came out with gifts. Triple H called Chris Jericho a liar and tried to make it seem like Eugene was his friend. Jericho and Regal knew where this was headed, but could do nothing about it. He tried to make it seem like they were jealous. The game hyped up the match, saying they're going to have a good time, and then he set his sights on Jericho, asking if he had a problem. There was tension, but both men saved out until the end of the night, where Jericho's team won the 6-man tag team match. The following week, The Rock returned and kicked off the show in Miami. This was one of his final appearances in WWE for about 7 years. But there's a reason why I'm mentioning this. At the time, whenever WWE had Rock around, they'd make the most out of his appearances and have him interact with a heel to generate a super entertaining segment. Here, Randy Orton was that guy. Orton had one of those early 2000s first round NBA draft suit on, and the electricity from this segment needs to be mentioned. Remember how I said there wasn't that heat with the matches and segments earlier? The Rock's return brought that back for a bit. Orton said they haven't talked despite facing off at WrestleMania, and he called them yesterday's news irrelevant. The Rock was even told that Orton was better looking than him. He said that he was familiar with Orton a long time ago, and he remembers when his dad got his ass whooped by Rocky Johnson. His grandfather was getting beat up as well by his own grandfather. The Intercontinental Champion said the fans can chant Rock's name all he wants, but they know who's better. The Rock made mention of Orton being a sissy and having a pretty pony toy, and he admitted that it was his. Rock was just messing around at this point. He was ready to whoop his ass here, but Orton backed off. So Rock said, "I might not beat you up today, but tonight," and he beat him up. Eric Bischoff quickly came in and kicked him out. But of course he made the most out of this. This was all to prevent Rock from interfering in the main event between Triple H and Eugene. Before leaving, Rock said Orton will feel something he never saw coming, and boom, Edge hits the spear. Orton had the last laugh though later that night. As for Triple H, he brought Eugene in a limo and got him away from William Regal. He even made it seem like he wasn't going to beat up Eugene, but that was all a joke. With that said, Eugene was having too much fun with the game. The match was competitive, and Eugene put up a fight, but Flair provided a distraction, and Triple H had him beat. All of a sudden, Eric Bischoff came out and told him that he's got to destroy him or he'll lose his title shot. Nah, this is crazy, and I haven't seen hating like this since Eddie Brock and Spider-Man 3 praying for Spider-Man's downfall at a church. Like, this guy's like, I'm not giving you a title shot until you beat up my nephew. Chris Benoit made the save but accidentally blasted Eugene with a chair, and this worked in Triple H's favor. The following week, Triple H managed to convince Eugene that he was trying to prepare him for the big time. He even called Chris Benoit a liar and a jerk. William Regal tried to help Eugene, but to no avail. His favorite wrestler in front of him calling William Regal a fake friend was convincing. The game asked if he wants to go with him in Evolution or a fake friend. So Eric Bischoff booked a match between William Regal and Triple H. The special referee was Eugene. This was one of Regal's first matches back. Eugene was in a tough position during this match, and after Triple H shoved Regal into him, he went insane. Slowly but surely, Triple H's plan of separating Eugene from Regal was working. Eugene being near the top, Triple H and Eric Bischoff led to him taking control of Raw for a night. Eugene had a different way of doing things. He had musical chairs for a title shot, and this was funny. It was pretty entertaining and different. Jericho had to use a different method to win it. Randy Orton wasn't happy about Eugene being an honorary member of Evolution, let alone defending his title tonight. Ric Flair had his own problems with playing musical chairs, and to top it all off, Eugene had a fun house. It was clear that he wasn't on the same page as Evolution. He was making matches and pissing off Flair, and there was far too much drama, but Triple H found time to focus on Chris Benoit. He said that it was a miracle Benoit won the title at WrestleMania, and since then, it's like he had divine intervention. Triple H said that on Sunday, he's going to answer the age-old question, God or Evolution? He obviously meant the latter, which means he wins the world title. All of a sudden, Edge came out and he said that when he got injured, Evolution was dominating. A year later, they still are, and something has to change. And he personally promised they're all going down. Nobody knows where or when, but eventually, they're all gonna fall. Triple H said that he heard it a million times from a million different people, and it's the same old story. Ironically, Evolution still stands and nothing changes. Edge attacked and managed to get one over the group. As for Randy Orton, Orton's title defense was intense. Jericho was going all out to ensure he became the champion, but Batista interfered and cost him the match. Then you have Triple H doing this, the most destructive, chaotic wrestler of this era, playing in a funhouse. What the hell? But it was all going well. Eugene was fully convinced he was a member of Evolution and considered anybody against Evolution an enemy. And with that, Triple H managed to beat Chris Benoit 6 nights before their match at Vengeance. Eugene, he was in tough situations, but always did what was right for the group. Vengeance was a turning point in Evolution's run. Batista, after having Jericho's number over the last few weeks, finally faced him in a match. While Y2J did put on a fight, Batista was far too much. Great start to the night for Evolution. It was a controversial finish with Jericho's foot on the rope, but it didn't matter. Triple H was still confident that Eugene would be the difference in the main event, and he was doing all he could to satisfy him, even at the expense of his own guys. Eugene teamed up with Flair to challenge for the World Tag Team Championships, and they did well, but lost by disqualification. During all of that, Ric Flair was pissed off at Eugene for copying him, wearing his robe. Eugene was doing Flair's moves, getting him all angry, but they came up short. Randy Orton and Edge's match for the Intercontinental Championship was interesting. I believe this was supposed to be Shelton Benjamin's match, but he got injured. Nonetheless, Orton and Edge put on a classic, and this was the best match on the show, and with over 20 minutes, they had all the time. Orton showed just how much he grew as an in-ring competitor, and this was so well done, and was probably the best singles match Orton had up to this point. Singles match, not no DQ, false count anywhere, or any of that. It showed WWE that was ready to go higher. The crowd was so into him behind every move. Orton's cheating was used against him, and Edge managed to beat him and become the new Intercontinental Champion. He was the longest reigning champion of the 2000s and was on the verge of tears. Great stuff though. This was a very memorable moment in both men's careers, especially Edge winning the IC title once again, but for Randy Orton it was only up from here. As for Triple H and Benoit, this was a very good match, but it was all about Eugene. That was the problem. Benoit was kind of a third wheel at this point. His titling was being overlooked by other stories such as this one, and they kind of realized, hey, it's over. We're going to end it. The game was doing everything well until he got his guy involved. Eugene didn't want to use the chair, and it went from bad to worse, and this led to Benoit capitalizing and scoring the victory. The game was angry and incensed. Eugene knew that he messed up, and it seemed like Triple H was going to beat him up, and every one of them had a reason to be angry, but he was going to drag it on for a bit. Eugene apologized and Evolution wanted to know what's up. At the same time, Eric Bischoff booked a world title match for the main event. At one point, he thought he won the title, but it turned out Benoit was still in it. Evolution comes out and Triple H finally beats him up. After weeks of claiming he was his friend, Triple H finally turned on Eugene and destroyed him and left them a bloody mess. In light of his actions, Triple H kicked off Raw the following week. He said that he knew the fans weren't proud of his actions, and even then he didn't feel bad. Triple H straight up said he hated Eugene and he was never his friend. He also thought it was pathetic that Benoit and Regal were crying for Eugene, somebody that didn't belong here. Eric Bischoff booked the title match between Triple H and Chris Benoit, and it was going to be an Iron Man match. The game, Triple H had the night off, but Benoit had to face Batista. The animal got himself disqualified, but managed to hurt Benoit and give Triple H an advantage heading into the Iron Man match. Legend Killer in the main event faced Edge, and yet again, it was another great match. This match is overlooked because it happened right before Orton's big push. I recommend this one. Orton failed to beat Edge again, and this time he was outsmarted. But it wasn't all bad for the Legend Killer. He managed to win a Battle Royal to become the #1 contender for the World Heavyweight Championship the following week. Triple H obviously had envy for Orton winning, but didn't show much, saying he didn't need luck to win in the main event. The Iron Man match was very good, and it's not the best one, but there was more good than bad. But once again, the problem was the title match wasn't the main focus. It was more about Eugene, Evolution, and all of that. Evolution's interference did nothing because Eugene came in and cost the game the title. In light of this, Triple H didn't let Raw kick off the following week and was all pissed over what went down. He was complaining about how he fought hard and said that championship was his life, so he called him out. It wasn't Eugene that came out though, it was William Regal. He revealed he was the one that let Eugene into the arena and told him to interfere. He said that it was foolish of Triple H to make an enemy out of a disadvantaged man and was ready to fight him. It was a great promo from Regal. It was his very best one because he showed a lot of emotion and it felt like it came from a real place. Great stuff. Their match was set for later that night. In other places, Randy Orton said that it was his destiny to become the youngest world champion. He made mention of Brock Lesnar but said he will accomplish more at the age of 24 than most have in their career. He showed respect to Benoit but said that he's the next world champion. Regal and Triple H's battle was intense. The game destroyed Regal and left him bloody and battered and even flipped over the stretcher after the match. The heat on him at this point was ridiculous. The fans were booing. They were pissed off at what Triple H was doing. Eric Bischoff booked Triple H and Eugene for SummerSlam, and this is the image of Triple H's heel run. He was dastardly, he was a terrible person, and he was one of the best heels of his era. Meanwhile, Orton proved himself by beating Chris Benoit in a 6-man tag team match. On the final Raw before SummerSlam, Triple H once again showed what he was capable of. Eugene left his hotel room and messed up because Triple H was there. He said that Eugene should be mad at himself. He doesn't belong in the business. And the game said he sent him a message last week, but he still didn't get it. And there was William Regal. He was beaten and battered, and Eugene knew he made a mistake. The tag team main event was now a handicap match since Eugene left. The match was working well for Evolution, but when Benoit got momentum, Ric Flair interfered. Eugene ran in there, he was dropping everyone, and Triple H made a run for it. Simple build for Orton and Benoit. It was more about Orton's story of being the youngest world champion, but SummerSlam, though, was a positive night for the group, at least for the most part. Batista didn't win the Intercontinental Championship, he came up short. Edge was being booed during their match, even though he was in his hometown, but he had a good performance. But with regards to the other two, it was much better. Triple H's match with Eugene was decent. It was Eugene's biggest match, and they put in the work. He was undefeated heading into it, so everyone expected him to take the L. Triple H was much higher on the card than him, and the push wasn't going to last long. His inexperience in storyline was used against him, with Triple H hitting a pedigree to win the match. Solid stuff is decent. The main event, though, was incredible. Randy Orton walked into what was his biggest match up to this point, and his push was huge. WWE saw everything was in line for him at this point. They were ready to push him to the very top. Regardless of Orton's result, this was one of his best performances, and for obvious reasons it's not mentioned. Benoit brought out the best in him, and in a big match situation he showed up. And for Randy Orton, this was an iconic moment to win the world title at the age of 24, and it was obviously because of Brock Lesnar leaving, but Orton was definitely deserving of the match and the title win. It was a bit early though. Me personally, I think they should have done Chris Jericho versus Chris Benoit here for the title. I think that would have been nice because Y2J had some momentum, but they wanted to go with Randy Orton, so there's that. Great moment, great match, great end to SummerSlam. Alright, so that does it for Evolution Part 2. I'm going to get back with Part 3. We'll talk about the storylines, all that, Batista's push, all of that. It's going to be nice, but with regards to this one, Evolution's stories were much better here. You know, their matches were better because Chris Benoit, HBK were around. Everyone felt like they were improved. With regards to Triple H, I think because he was overexposed a lot, people didn't really realize, hey, he got better in ring. He's much better than he was in the last year. Actually, in the last 2 years as well. Orton seized the opportunity. He was getting a big-ass push. Batista was slowly improving. Flair was still loved by the fans even though he was a heel. But compared to the first video, Evolution was much more in tune. They were much more connected. They clicked. Last time around, Batista was injured, Orton was injured, and it took them a while to get going. But here, they're much better. Their matches were better. Everything about them was better. The Eugene story was a bit random. You know, Triple H having a SummerSlam match with him is kind of strange. But it is what it is. Orton won the title here, and it was only going to get better for him. So yeah. Alright, what you guys think of Evolution Part 2? Please comment down below, and that's the first video. Make sure you hit the pedigree on the like button, and perhaps the RK on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.